All right. So I think so far we have covered almost all the administration stuff. You know, I think we did a whole revision last week too. Right now, I just want to start. I think last week we talked about reports and the different types of reports, the report folder structure and the sharing, how report sharing can be done based on the folder and different types of reports like tabular report, summary report, matrix report, and just how to add a, what you call a chart to the report. And then I think we also spoke about creating custom report types and what's the advantage of creating custom report types, like changing the report label, and also adding fields via lookup, changing the layout, adding fields by default. There are so many options that we can do by creating custom report types, and we can also create the reports based on the custom report types. One thing we need to be sure of is whenever we are creating a report, if at all we want to create a report on an object, the allow reports checkbox on the object have to be checked. In case, you get a case or you get a ticket saying that you are unable to, if people are unable to work on, unable to create reports on certain objects, that's the first thing that you have to check, whether the enable reports checkbox on the, object is checked or not. And then, again, the creation of custom reports and all that stuff is pretty common. Okay. Now, let's talk about deployments. Okay. So what is meant by actually deployment? So I think we covered this topic very initially, that deployment is nothing but all the development that happens will happen in a testing environment. Okay. And only when the testing, when the changes look good, when all the testing is done, when whatever code that we wrote or whatever configuration that we made, only when it looks good, that's when it would be moved to production. Okay, so and hence moving the code from one environment to another, moving the metadata from one environment to another, that process is called as deployment. Okay, for example, I think we spoke this example, Facebook. The Facebook that we use is a production version or a live version. We call it as production version. As we are talking, Facebook is doing lots of development, lots of new feature changes, doing so many backend enhancements. Now, are they doing directly in the environment that we use? No, they won't be doing that. They will have a similar copy, not one. They might have numerous similar copy of the same environment that we are actually using, but they are doing some development there. They are actually adding the code. They are configuring things. They are customizing things, and and Facebook definitely would have a great QA team where they will be testing all the changes, making sure nothing is broken, everything is good, and that's when they are moving the change to the actual live environment. Okay, so when they move the change to the live environment, that's when we are able to see the changes available in Facebook. Okay, any new feature or anything like that. So nobody can directly, nobody would want to directly make any changes in production because, unless it's tested thoroughly, we will not be confident that the configuration change or the code change or any metadata change that we make would be working correctly. That's the reason, any ideal development environment would have a proper deployment and also, a proper deployment and proper SDLC process that they follow. Okay. Now, what I'm going to tell you is, it's not, there is no ideal way or there is no one single solution. You know what I mean? There is no single solution that can solve the needs of all the companies, but usually how people follow is what I'm going to tell you. Okay. I'm going to tell you two different ways. Again, it's not ideal or anything like that. Usually people do this, but there can be, depending on your environment or depending on the company that you're working for, there might be other ways that they might do too. Okay. Now, first of all, let's talk about So production is the live environment, right? So what happens is we can create, let's assume, you work for a company and that company decided they want to use Salesforce. Okay. So what do? When they want to use Salesforce, they will, I think we discussed this, they will pay the amount to Salesforce. They will get some licenses. Okay. So they will get an instance, just like how we signed up. They get an instance, we signed up and we log into that instance. So just like how we signed up and we log into the instance, exactly the same way, they will be able to log into it, and basically Salesforce, based on the number of licenses that they buy, they will have those licenses available there. For the environment that we sign up, we always see only 2 different Salesforce licenses, but depending on the amount the company, that is being paid for, they will get a version exactly that is looking like us, just with more licenses. That's how the basic copy will be. Okay, nothing extra, nothing less. Okay, so that's the production environment. But, of course, any company would want to do the development and all those things. So what they do is, from production environment, okay, along with when they are buying licenses for a production environment, they might buy the licenses for these 2. They might buy licenses for a full copy sandbox as well. I'm going to talk to you what full copy sandbox is. Okay. So when they buy the license for this, they will also pay some money for a full copy sandbox. So full copy sandbox is nothing but, so from production, okay, they got production, they also have license for full copy. They also paid money for full copy sandbox. Full copy sandbox is nothing but, from production, there will be a setting. They go to setup and there will be a setting called sandboxes. And in the sandboxes section, they will click create a sandbox. And, the type of the sandbox that they will select will be full copy sandbox, and they will name it as, we can name it as anything, but let's assume they name it as staging. So from production, a full copy sandbox that is exactly like this, it exactly looks like this, it exactly have the data like production, a carbon copy of this environment will be created, okay, which is called as, and they can name it as staging sandbox, or, they can name it anything, but let's assume they named it as staging, okay, it's a full copy sandbox. In the same way, at the same time, they will also create another sandbox called integration sandbox. In the same time, they will also create another not another one. I'll just say multiple dev sandboxes. Okay. So they will, depending on the number of developers that are there in the company, they will create multiple developer sandboxes. Okay. So first of all, production is the live environment, the actual, just like whatever we are using, that's the live environment. Now, what do they want to do? They want to do development, right? In order to do development, they have to create similar kind of orgs, right? So that's why what they do, first they create a full copy sandbox, which is a carbon copy of production. Then they create, it's not in the order. You can create in any way, any order, but, I'm just saying they create full copy sandbox. They create a developer pro sandbox, and then numerous developer sandboxes. Okay, developer sandbox are nothing but, if there is a team of 5 developers, they'll create 5 sandboxes for them. Okay. Now, what is the need for these 5 sandboxes? So now, first, when it started, okay, let's just talk about the difference between full copy sandbox and, a dev sandbox or a dev pro sandbox. Okay, let's just talk about that. So a full copy sandbox is a carbon copy of production. It will have all the data, everything that a production is. It's a carbon copy. Okay. Now the dev pro and dev sandboxes, they are a carbon copy with terms of metadata, but they will not have any data in them. Okay. So the configuration code, everything, the functionality will be there, but they will not have the data, actual records that we are entering. So because of the memory size. Okay. Now, is that clear? I will show you how those environments look like, but is that clear so far? So we have a production environment. That's the live environment that all the users are going to use. That's the actual environment where everything will be there. And this is the environment everybody should be afraid of to make any changes, because any change that you make will impact all the users of the system. Okay, that's the production environment. See, let's say if I'm using Gmail, right? The Gmail that we are using is a production environment. Okay, now will Google make changes directly in the environment that we use or the org that we use? No, they wouldn't use that. So they will have a carbon copy of exact, just like the Gmail that we see, they will create carbon copies, multiple carbon copies of it, and developers will be working on them. Okay. Now, let's say, the reason why I said multiple developers, right? If the team has 5 developers, there will be 5 dev sandboxes. Okay. And everybody work on those changes, and all the developers work on those changes and move the changes to an integration sandbox. And once the integration sandbox, everything is working fine, then they move the changes to staging sandbox, and finally they move the changes to production. Okay. You know what? Let me actually show the example. I just want to stop the recording and just want to show the example.